Right, for this year's project, I think I will build a aircraft. And being that I don't have a license, nor could really afford one, I think it should be a hang glider. Thankfully in Britain, it turns out you don't actually need a license. You just need a little certificate to say that you can fly. And you can technically fly without one of those if you've just read enough books. You probably shouldn't, but you can. It's rather wonderful. You go on these websites for learning to fly hang gliders, and on the first day they have you flying an aircraft by yourself. If you did a really bad job, you could snap both your silly legs off. Decided just to do a very basic frame here. It's like the simple Apollo one. It was proposed by a very clever dude to use a rigid parachute for gliding down and have little wheels underneath the module for when they landed back on Earth. But partly because the world is mostly water, and also partly because most of the world that isn't water isn't runway, they decided against it. Because if something goes wrong, you can't always decide where you're going to be landing on Earth. But after that, the same dude made a whole sport of it and got everyone involved. It's really wonderful. And now, just with something you can carry on your back, you're able to jump into the sky and fly around the place, providing you've got a good enough updraft to give you enough lift. Now, the little guy worked, so I moved to this bigger fellow, which, well, wasn't too great. The top was far too heavy, being made out of silly solid lumps of wood instead of space-age materials like extruded aluminium section or carbon fiber composite. And also, it's not very strong. You wouldn't want that holding your weight up. Though, if you look at the original drawings and pictures of people flying these things, the wings did flex. Like, there was barely enough material in a hang glider to keep it in the sky. So if you bear that in mind when you're building one, I think that's a good mantra as to the construction, for everything to be as minimal as possible. So after the failure of the wooden pole design, I went for a bit more traditional structure out of ribs and spars. It's very basic. It's mostly just testing out the various constructions. A nice H section for the wing, and then these little hot bended wood strip spar foil pieces. But after I've successfully tested this a few times, thinking of moving up to a much larger version with perhaps a chainsaw engine, as chainsaw engines are very affordable for the actual power output. It's a very tantalizing thought to think that it would only take 3 or 4 chainsaw engines to lift a human into the sky. This is my favorite technique for making nice, stiff, rigid pieces of pushrod wire. Takes the steel and work hardens it to the point of nearly breaking, and then you get this wonderful rigid rod for driving things. And obviously it's no good if it's all bending and flopping about the place as you try and fly your plane. And without an engine, its glide slope is rubbish, but it's something.